my fellow Americans.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
Let me ask you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, your particular, there's 4 groups out there and inspectors, you're the group you headed, anytime you are denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act as they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions of relevant resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You have indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access.
Compelled. Well, okay, compelled. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the President now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the Major's. The Major's assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the President have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. slightly above your pay grade, to decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip, because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Rationality belongs to the cool observers, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith, and the naive faith of the proletarian requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which have to be provided by myth makers to keep the ordinary person on the right course.
that I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament... There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans,
right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. Okay, you get one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among animals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's let Dr. Fauci.
I have to, well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2. That's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well,
we don't
wait
know
a minute.
If it did come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now propagating, Senator, because if you look at the viruses that were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports, that were published in the literature, It is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those viruses caused it.
It
No
is
one alleging that
molecularly.
those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain-of-function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That
you
is
can't
not-
get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
I'm not obfuscating the truth.
Senator
You are the
Paul's
one.
time is expired, but I will allow the witness to.
Let me just finish. I want everyone to understand that if you look at those viruses, and that's judged by qualified virologists and evolutionary biologists, those viruses are molecularly impossible
No one's
to
saying
result
they are. No
in
one's saying those
SARS-CoV-2.
viruses caused the pandemic.
Senator Paul,
We're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were
They're not.
animal viruses that became more transmissible in human, and you funded it.
And you
won't admit the truth.
And you
Senator
implying
Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses who come before this committee to respond. Dr.
and you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individual. I totally resent
could
that.
have
And
been.
if anybody
And it
is
could have been.
lying here, Senator, it is you.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everyone, to Redacted on this Thursday night. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And on this show, we seek the truth wherever it takes us, and we have no agenda. Our only agenda on this show is anti-war and pro-peace, so got a problem with that, then this might not be the show for you.
Anti-propaganda is a big theme tonight. I am on fire about some narratives around this document, Biden document story. We're going to get to that. I just want to tell you what's lit my ass on fire right now.
So she's on fire, and the Twitter files and the red dress, and the Twitter files are on fire. So we just got the latest tranche of Twitter files. This is number 14, but this one is smoking. This is crazy. This is the Russiagate Twitter files from Matt Taibbi. So we're going to go through the very latest on this. There's a lot of interesting pieces that we've been pulling apart, sort of how this sort of leads like tentacles out of it. So we'll break that all down for you tonight.
Yes, and we are going to talk about some bad news out of Ukraine if you are someone who wants people to live there. Total destruction, which is what we've been telling you, that people who are warmongering are championing the further death of innocent people. Yeah,
so we'll tell you the latest on the soldiers. It's really, really bad news on that. Colonel Douglas McGregor is going to be joining us on the show tonight for his analysis on that. And we're going to look at the latest Biden documents. So there was top secret documents that were found at the University of Penn in a Biden think tank office. Well, now the second batch has been found.
The second and third. Yeah,
second and third
this
batch
continues to unfold.
And we're getting details on like what the location of all of this is. There's a lot of hypocrisy on this. We're going to tell you maybe what's in these documents, what's being redacted, what's being held back. So we've got a lot to say about that.
Plus, we want to talk about MPs in the UK, members of parliament, who've been ousted for asking very legitimate questions and presenting very legitimate and uncomfortable data about the COVID vaccine. This is crazy town.
Yeah, so they're getting their hands slapped and removal of power because of this. So all of that and more as Redacted starts right now. SD707 says, Clayton, where's your tie? I don't wear a tie. When I retired from mainstream media, when I left the belly of the beast, I was in mainstream media for 20 years as a news anchor. The last 10 years of my life, I was a news anchor for Fox News Channel. When I didn't have to wake up at 4 in the morning and do a morning show for 4 hours wearing a tie. Yeah. Like, I think I burned a lot of the ties.
We gave a lot of them away on Craigslist.
I donated a ton of them to a veterans group. So like veterans group came to our house, and I literally they're full of ties. They're full of my old Fox News ties. Yeah. Yes. So no, I'm not wearing ties.
I use my old ties for cable management. They work great for that.
That's smart. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. And sometimes the girls use them for yoga, like as a yoga strap. So if your ties ever smell like feet, that's the reason.
I think I own a tie. I think I own one tie.
I think I bought a one tie because we needed it for an event.
It's so nice of you to talk about how you don't dress uncomfortably anymore, because I wore the most uncomfortable dress today. But somebody in the chat yesterday said I looked pregnant, and I didn't like that. So I wore something a little more fitted today.
Don't ever say that about my wife. I'm going to reach through the camera and come after you, sons of bitches.
So anyway, I don't think I look pregnant today. But,
no, you look very lovely. You look lovely. So it's Thursday night show. We got a big Redacted show for you on this Thursday. Good to see all of you. I hope you're subscribed to the channel. We do this show Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Live. We are live. Good to see all of our friends on Rumble. Good to see all of our friends on YouTube. Good to see everyone. And we have a daily newsletter that you should all subscribe to because it's totally free and it's the bomb. I had someone write to me today saying it's the bomb. That's what all the kids say. I had someone write to me say, this is my favorite newsletter. It's my favorite way to start the day. So thank you. It's very easy to do. Just go to redacted.inc, not .com, and you put in your email address and you'll receive a welcome email. You have to verify your email. And then tomorrow morning, it's free. You know, you get a newsletter delivered to your inbox that'll have like 5 or 6 big stories, a couple of things that you might have missed. We try to make you laugh a little bit. We try to make you cry. No, we don't try to make you cry. But we try to inform you. And then you're done. 5-10 minutes, cup of coffee. You're like, wow, I learned a lot. and then you can go about your day, feel more secure and smarter with your friends when you're at the water cooler. So Redacted.inc is the place to go for that.
Absolutely.
Any other housekeeping items before we get into these Twitter files?
No.
No?
I'm ready.
David, Philip, any housekeeping stuff you want to get to before we dive into this?
I'm ready. These files we've been waiting for these for how long?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So shortly this afternoon, we saw Matt Taibbi tweeting, the Twitter files number 14 about to drop. So here they are. Here are the Russiagate lies, the Twitter files. I've been waiting for these to see tell the tale of the fake tale of Russian bots, and what actually happened with Democrats actually really pushing Twitter to make a narrative. So it turns out Twitter executives were not happy with Democrats in this new round of Twitter files.
This is much less an indictment of Twitter and much more an indictment of not just the government, but one political party that was trying to frame a narrative around what they wanted in order to, if we really boil it down, go after Trump and Trump allies.
Yeah.
It's really as simple as that. And, they sort of brought out the hits of, we can always use Russia as the bad guy. Let's do that. We can make it seem as though Russia did this. Now, did they foresee maybe a major conflict coming with Russia 5 years down the road? Who knows? It's possible. And it continues to unpeel the onion, which we talk about all the time, is that the narratives around Russia in the mainstream media are largely false. That doesn't mean you have to support war, but you have to sort of see through this smokescreen of always blaming Russia for something. What's behind that? Well, we're going to see more behavior in that same direction of blaming Russia for something that really, has nefarious meanings. Now, I was one of these this is a lot around Devin Nunes. And at the time, you have to remember that Republicans were trying to raise the flag about certain surveillance around the Trump campaign leading up into the 2016 campaign. And Democrats basically made fun of them for it. They sort of mocked them like, oh, this is you doing. I mean, Rachel Maddow all but sort of called Devin Nunes like just a little Trumpy dweeb.
Right.
I watched this. I sort of fell for it at the time. And now that I see that this is based on air, I feel madder than ever.
So let's go through.
It's funny how everything that pointed towards Trump was elevated and put out, but then you have the Hunter Biden laptop that was suppressed. So it's just that is a clear manipulation. That everything was what do you call that? Where it's just promoted and everybody it was allowed on every platform if you said anything about Trump or Russia, but if anything happened with Biden or the laptop,
right?
Don't talk about it.
Yeah. So let's get into the details.
Yes, let's. All right, here we go. Here is Twitter thread number 14, Twitter files number 14, the Russiagate lies. One, the fake tale of Russian bots and the release the memo hashtag. So at a crucial moment in a years-long furor, Democrats denounced a report about flaws in the Trump-Russia investigation, saying it was boosted by Russian bots and trolls. Twitter officials were aghast. This is amazing. So Twitter officials are saying, there's no evidence of Russian influence. And yet you guys are pushing this. And internally they were saying, wait a second, we're feeding congressional trolls. Congress basically is asking for this stuff. Democrats are asking for this stuff. And we at Twitter are basically feeding this troll army that they've created, this garbage. So Twitter was basically acknowledging there's nothing here. They knew at the time there was nothing here. And we have all these Democrats on the Hill basically asking us to push this fake story.
Right. And we saw a little bit more of this communication just a few weeks ago with the previous round of Twitter files where Mark Warner, Congressman Mark Warner, was asking for this. And Twitter continued to push back, and they had a media fight. They had a fight in the media saying, we don't see it. We're looking. We want to. We can't find it.
So here's a letter. Do you want to explain this letter? This is Dear Senator Dianne Feinstein and Representative Schiff. Thank you for your letter regarding hashtags and concerns over Russian disinformation efforts.
So the first 3 paragraphs, they just kind of say, we like working with you. We take this serious. We understand your concern. We've looked into it. But then in the bottom is where they give their results. We performed an analysis of available geographical data for tweets using this hashtag, and our initial inquiry based on available data has not identified any significant activity connected with Russia with respect to tweets posting original content to this hashtag.
Yeah. So we don't really find anything about this. We see we are feeding congressional trolls.
So this is internal conversation about it. The letter we just showed you was to Dianne Feinstein from legal counsel. And then more communication saying we're putting the cart before the horse here because we don't have any data. Clearly, you want this narrative. We get that, but we can't give it to you. And internally, they're calling them trolls. They're calling Congress people, elected senators and congressmen and congresswomen, trolling for information that they need to scream from their pulpits.
Twitter warned politicians and media they not only lacked evidence, but had evidence the accounts weren't Russian. So they had they knew that this wasn't true, but they had evidence that showed they were not Russian. That's even a step further, right? And they were roundly ignored by Democrats. Like, that's fine that you found no Russian involvement, and the fact that those accounts have nothing to do with Russia and you know where they came from, that's fine. We're ignoring you. Go ahead anyway and push this narrative.
All right, now we come to the memo because we're specifically talking about hashtag release the memo. So the memo is about Devin Nunes, Republican, and he submitted this memo to the House Intelligence Committee asking for information and an investigation about FISA warrants on Carter Page. Now, Carter Page was connected to the Trump organization, but he's not a politician and he's not an elected official. And so Devin Nunes then spells out how, these are the proper channels to get a FISA warrant, which is just a warrant that's tracking activity, communications without a person's knowledge. He says in order to get one from a private citizen, you need this to be signed off on by the director or deputy director of the FBI, and then another approval from either the attorney general, the deputy attorney general, or the Senate confirmed assistant attorney general of the National Security Division. And then he lays out that you need to renew this every 90 days in order to, because you can't put a blanket warrant on a FISA warrant on somebody like, we're just going to track Natali forever, right? It doesn't work that way. You have to show probable cause of wanting this every 90 days. And this happened. It says that it was signed off on by several different people. And he's just wondering, how can that happen? How does something like that happen? We'd like to see why you thought that this person was worth looking into. And so this is, it's important for public trust. If we know that people in the Trump campaign were tracked like this, we need to know why.
Right. And then it was all but confirmed, as they say here, the Nunes assertions would virtually all be verified in a report by the Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz in December of 2019. So what Nunes is saying here is then confirmed but in 2019. And
they just made fun of him like, he was a never Trumper. I don't know if that's true or not, but this was the mainstream media narrative. And then when Trump was elected, now he's a brown noser and he's trying to curry favor with the new chief of, head of state. They just, like I said, I remember it so clearly, them sort of painting him as this like brown nosing kind of like, here, boss, I got a memo. You're going to like this.
Yeah, you see, and then they have a couple of media clips from that time. Andrea Mitchell, Nunes has turned House Intel Committee into a joke, says Andrea Mitchell. Right? Then here's another one. Opinion. The Nunes memo is out. It's a joke and a sham. And it's amazing. They're all using the same language. Like
we're going to get to Andrea Mitchell later in the Biden documents.
Yeah.
I got words for that lady.
Oh, yeah. Ex-RNC chairman rips Nunes memo for the joke it is. See, they keep using the same language. And that's very interesting that they keep using the same language, almost like they're handed this language, these talking points. And we saw that last week, of course, in another story. What story was it, David Phillips? Do you guys remember last week where Like everyone was using the same language on a story. Democrats all came out. Oh, refuge, Bolsonaro. We can't allow him to have refuge in the United, and all like Ilhan Omar, AOC. They all were using the exact same sentences. Like who gives them these sentences as talking points? It's pretty crazy. So that was that. Okay, next slide here. On January 23rd, 2018, Senator Feinstein and Congressman Adam Schiff published an open letter saying the hashtag gained the immediate attention and assistance of social media accounts linked to Russian influence operations. So, hey, thanks for this hashtag. It's now gotten immediate attention and assistance of social media accounts linked to Russian influence operations. Then the Nunes memo distorts, they said, classified information, but they didn't call it incorrect. So you want to explain this? So
yes. So this is Feinstein and Schiff saying, even though this Devin Nunes memo, it's distorting classified information. They're saying, but it's not really true that the Trump campaign was tracked in this way. They didn't say that as much, but they're trying to really hard push away from the actual content of the memo.
Well, and also that letter, you can see that it's addressed to both Dorsey and Zuckerberg. So this stuff was happening on, we know that if it's happening on Twitter, it's happening on Facebook, it's happening on YouTube, it's happening on like all of the social networks.
Oh, I didn't see that. Which letter was?
Yeah, it was good catch. That was on, if you look at the top of, was it this one?
I missed it.
It was
the Dianne Feinstein one.
Yeah, right
Mr.
here.
Dorsey
It's
and Mr. Zuckerberg.
See, it's very low quality, but you can see
that one's really hard to read.
Dear Mr. Dorsey and Mr. Zuckerberg.
Good catch, David.
You get a star sticker.
Yay!
And then
I was just going to say that.
Matt Taibbi writes for number 10, Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal followed suit, publishing a letter saying, we find it reprehensible that Russian agents have so eagerly manipulated innocent Americans, sending that to Twitter. Like, can you imagine if you're Jack Dorsey and like you're getting all of this stuff from like the FBI comes to, then you get all of these members of Congress who are sending these letters. We're really upset because we have this intelligence that's saying Russian, and you're saying internally, and you're having your own engineers go through these accounts. You're like, no, these are not Russian. And by the way, we found out, like, not only not Russian, we know where these accounts are from. They have nothing to do with Russia. We're telling you that, but you don't care.
Right.
You're just going to continue to force our hand.
And later on, they circle back around and say, like, hey, I'd like some information on this about the assertion I published yesterday. It's kind of crazy that
in 24 hours, we expected you guys to have a full hands-on report.
No, what they're saying, like Dianne Feinstein, I believe, what we're going to get to, she publishes something to the American public. And then the next day asks for Twitter to back it up on what she already published. Like, you already went with that, girl. Like, you had your chance. We're telling you we don't have it.
So now we get into the meat of this. This is the FBI piece of this and this Hamilton 68 dashboard. This thing is really fascinating. So Feinstein, Schiff, Blumenthal, and media members all pointed to the same source, this mysterious Hamilton 68 dashboard, created by former FBI counterintelligence official Clint Watts, under the auspices of the Alliance for Securing Democracy. So they all kept talking about this. According to Hamilton 68, released the memo. Hamilton 68, released the memo. Hamilton 68 just launched, even though it just launched last summer, they really feel like that it's comfortable making the claim based on additional research and analysis. The deep state has been a constant topic on the dashboard for months, but nothing like the past few weeks as the release the memo hashtag peaked. It went from 5% of the content back in September to where it's consistently around 15%. So the dashboard, here it is, which featured a crude picture of Putin deviously blowing evil red Twitter birds into the atmosphere, was vague in how it reached its conclusions.
Yes, so Twitter later discussed this. It says inside Twitter, executives panned this and it told each other that they should be skeptical of this for a couple of reasons. They say here it plays to ASD, What do you think that is? That escapes me.
Alliance for Securing Democracy.
Oh, okay.
That was the
and they're saying and then Yoel Roth, our favorite chief twit, comes in and says we don't know anything about how this Hamilton 68. What is their methodology? They don't give us a list of usernames that we can even look into. So we don't see what they're seeing, and we would love to, sort of reproduce this study if they could just tell us how they did it and who are the users that are the offenders here.
2 key complaints. Hamilton 68 seemed to be everyone's only source, and no one was checking with Twitter. Like, oh, the FBI made up this like random BS dashboard, and then that's what we're supposed to go with? But then when you check with Twitter, they're like, no, that doesn't happen. These aren't real accounts. Sorry, you're wrong about that. But no one seemed to check with them about this.
At some point, Twitter just can't handle it anymore. If you go to number 16, we're 2 ahead of that.
Okay.
That the vice president of communications or policy vice president is saying maybe we should push back on this because this is just, we need to correct the record where all of this out here is just wrong.
So Twitter is basically pushing back. I mean, good for them on this one, saying, well, this is just wrong, but good for them. But then, of course, what ended up happening? Like, they had this internal dialogue back, but they didn't come forward with this. They didn't go public with this. And in the end, of course, it was suppressed. And this,
right. That's another thing that's missing is why didn't they? Why did this die?
Right. Matt Taibbi writes, number 17, Yoel Roth couldn't find any Russian connection to the release of the memo at all.
In fact, go to number 18. It said, we were not able to find this connected to Russian bots. If you read the highlighted part, can you open the graphic, please? It says, we investigated and found that engagement on release the memo hashtag was overwhelmingly organic and driven by strong, very important tweeters, very important people, basically, like real people engagement, including WikiLeaks, Donald Trump Jr., Representative Steve King, and others. None of those things are Russian. Those are just people who have, opinions that are more right-wing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call WikiLeaks right-wing.
Or journalists, right? Or members of Congress. So you have Representative Steve King.
Right.
Okay. So he's not allowed to have an opinion about... all right. What number are we on now?
19. This is what we were talking about earlier, that a staffer for Dianne Feinstein reached out again and said, it'd be helpful to know how Hamilton 68 goes by the process by which they decide an account is Russian. She asked for this, but only after Feinstein had already published her letter about Russian influence. So you've already, set this on fire. So you're circling back around for truth about something you've already said, which means you're publishing things you don't know at all are true.
When Twitter not even don't know that are true, was told by Twitter that it wasn't, like they couldn't find anything. So she knew already the findings and said it anyway.
Yeah.
When Twitter spoke to Blumenthal staffer, they tried to wave him off because we don't believe these are bots. Added another, it might be worth nudging Blumenthal's staffer that it could be in his boss's best interest to not go out there because it could come back to make him look silly.
But that's the thing. This one really haunts me because it didn't until now.
Yeah.
They got away with it. They got their influence. They were able to flip elections and flip balance of power. They absolutely did not look silly until this moment.
Nick Pickles. Love this name, Nick Pickles, by the way.
I would not like to have that name.
Nick Pickles. Just be glad his name's not Richard Pickles. So one Twitter exec even tried to negotiate, implying an undisclosed future PR concession if Richard Blumenthal would lay off on this. It seems like there are other wins we could offer him. Like they're trying to horse trade. Like we'll basically we'll give you some good stuff if you just lay off this one because it's not true. Like we could drum up some other stuff. Yeah. Let's say it's China. We'll say it's other. Yeah. Or we'll just create some other shit that you can take.
Yeah. I mean, we'll run an internal survey about how people don't like Trump. Can you take that? Take that instead.
But it didn't work because number 23, Blumenthal published his letter anyway, despite the fact that he knew better. Execs eventually grew frustrated over what they saw as circular process, presented with claims of Russian activity. Even when denied, they led to more claims. They expressed this explicitly to Blumenthal's camp, saying Twitter spent a lot of resources on the request and the reward from Blumenthal shouldn't be round after round of requests. We can't do a user notice each time this happens. They're like, hey, we've got other stuff to go on here, other stuff to do. We can't handle all this. Eventually, Twitter staff realized Blumenthal isn't looking for real nuanced solutions, but just wants to get credit for pushing us further.
That's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, here's the internal. Sorry, the scale's wrong. Blumenthal isn't always looking for real and nuanced solutions. He just wants to get credit and push us further, Carlos writes.
And then another senior executive, number 27, says this is like feeding congressional trolls. And he compares it to the children's book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. And Matt Taibbi talks about this is like a if you give an inch, they take a mile type story where you give the mouse the cookie and then it wants a glass of milk and then a blanket and then another glass of milk and then another cookie. And it comes full circle where like it's a child that it's like a hostage situation when you put your daughter to bed. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, it's total hostage situation. Like, no, now I want a drink of water. No,
you didn't give me a hug.
No, I need another hug.
I forgot about
which I know it's sweet. Because someday I'm going to be looking back and be like, oh, I wish I could have had that extra hug again. So I don't want to be an ass. Someone in our chat. So let me know what you think about this as we go through this letter here in our chat right now on Rumble. Someone says they should. Jaybird Thoughts on Rumble says they should have blown the whistle. Like, how many of you, I know it's easy to say that, but how many of you believe that these Twitter employees should have come forward and, well, who would they have gone to? I mean, because the media is totally they could have gone to maybe some conservative media. They could have.
And said, look, we continue to show these congressional leaders that their assertions are false or not founded. And they're publishing these things anyway.
Yeah, but that's like, it's almost like the whole thing where it's, you got to be quiet against your own team because like they're on that team. Right. You know, they want to help them, but like they can't, but they also can't be like, well, you know what, our team members are being out of line. We need to tell the coach. Like, they're not going to do that because that could have caused a lot more damage to their team.
Well, one thought that I have about where else would they have blown the whistle is their own platform. They failed to do that then, but they're doing it now.
Yeah.
But what would we have done if we had seen that 5 years ago? We would be in a much different place. We would presumably be much less of a divided nation.
Yeah, and we might not have the president of the United States. The bottom line, we might not have the president of the United States that we have right now if we were allowed to see the truth. Think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, if the Hunter Biden laptop story wasn't suppressed, after the New York Post published the story, after Miranda Devine's story hit the press, and it was kept from everyone. This pushing of a fake Russia narrative, pushing this. I mean, arguably, this goes way to the top, and it influenced the national election. We might have a totally different president of the United States right now.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, didn't the Russia stuff also influence an impeachment?
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
Right. Yeah. And what's interesting, of course, is like what led to that impeachment. Arguably is perhaps even more fiery under what happened with the Hunter Biden laptop, and there's no investigation. There's no.
There is now in the House
on the Hunter side, yeah. But as far as it relates to the president of the United States, it never got to that level. So just the phone call led to an impeachment. What Anyway, we can go down that rabbit hole. But Matt Taibbi wraps it up here, saying the metaphor for the endless Russia request was so perfect. One executive wrote, "I'm legit embarrassed that I didn't think of that first." So, just when you think that Twitter is like maybe trying to do the right thing, no, they're literally like, wow, that's a great idea.
I read it differently. I think it's the metaphor for the mouse and the cookie is they're saying, oh, that's so good. Like, yes, this is exactly what we're experiencing. I wish I had thought of that mouse and the cookie. I think that's what they're saying. I think that Twitter is absolutely dumbfounded here that elected leaders will not stop coming after them to validate their own assertions for political gain. They just can't believe it. It is what it seems to me.
Well, it has to be so maddening. And I was just sitting here thinking, it'd be like if you were expected to react like if somebody was telling you they were assaulted by the like physically assaulted by the literal Easter bunny, and you were being forced to like try to pretend like you believe it, and you're just sitting there going, "What? I know, I don't buy this. This isn't happening." And I mean, but in this case, though, they had proof that it wasn't Russia doing it, and then still everybody's like, "No, you've got to say it. You've got to say it." I mean, it's just maddening.
Yes.
Absolutely maddening.
Yeah.
Someone in our chat says they could have come to Redacted. Yeah, you could have come to our show with this information, and we would have blown the whistle.
We didn't exist back then.
We existed as humans, but our show in its form didn't. But now we do. So if anyone wants to come forward, and anyone from Facebook, by the way, you know my email address, Clayton@redacted.inc.
Ooh, wouldn't that be so good if
Anybody
we
at
got the
Facebook-
Facebook files?
Yes, Facebook. Anybody who works at Facebook that would like to share information with us, please let me know. We would love to feature it here on Redacted. Again, Clayton@redacted.inc. That's my email. So send it to me, and we'd be happy to tell your story here. And anybody else, anybody who, I don't know, works at another big video platform as well that is
Even
often
anonymously.
censoring. Even anonymously, totally anonymously. Love to see that. Share that with us. Let us know. So at the bottom line of all of this is that Natali says, despite universal internal conviction, there were no Russians in the Russian story. Twitter went on to follow a slavish pattern of not challenging the Russia claims on the record. And that kind of is where we are. So now outside counsel from DC connected firms advised Twitter to use language like, with respect to particular hashtags, we take seriously any activity that may represent an abuse of our platform, teaching them how to actually talk about it. As a result, reporters from the AP to Politico to NBC to Rolling Stone continue to hammer the Russian bot story, despite a total lack of evidence. So Russians weren't just blamed for the release of the memo, but Schumer shut down Parkland shooting, even gun control now to widen the divide, according to the New York Times.
Well, and that's like, we have an interview of a CIA agent on our countdown timer that's talking about how certain things that they put out at certain times of war or whatever were 100% fake propaganda. And they knew that's exactly what this was because they could not find any evidence of it anywhere. They asked, they tried, they pushed to try to find any glimpse of evidence. And even major offices, branches of the government came out and said, the intelligence agency said they had found it. And it was all 100% lies and propaganda.
Yeah. And then later, and what's worse is number 35, all the mainstream media outlets that are willing to gobble it right up. They just love it. NBC, Politico, AP, Times, Business Insider, all of them just picked it right up. Russian bot, yes. Russian bot for anything we don't like. That's the new scapegoat. And Matt Taibbi says that the staffs of Feinstein, Schiff, and Blumenthal all declined to comment
on this story,
on this release of documents and their participation in this Russian bot narrative. Who did comment? He says Devin Nunes. He said Schiff and the Democrats falsely claimed Russia was behind the release the memo hashtag all my investigative work by spreading the Russia collusion hoax. They instigated one of the greatest outbreaks of mass delusion in U.S. history.
And he says this release the memo episode is just one of many of the Twitter files. The Russiagate scandal was built on the craven dishonesty of politicians and reporters who for years ignored the absence of data to fictional scare headlines. So we'll have more on that. So again, we're still waiting on, and I think they're sort of really trying to vet right now, it seems, the Fauci files. Like, we were told that those would be coming out last week. We still don't have the Fauci files.
Yeah.
So we're still waiting on what that's going to. Yeah. So why? What's taken so long on the Fauci files? That's a darn good question. All right, we've got more news to get to here on this Thursday. We're going to talk about the latest in Ukraine. Wait till you hear some of the news that's coming out of Ukraine this afternoon. It's really troubling. Colonel Douglas McGregor is going to be joining us in just a few moments to break down that latest in Ukraine, all the news coming out of there. Plus, we're going to look at the Biden documents and why are they showing up in multiple locations? Top secret documents. You remember the documents that he vilified Trump for having in Mar-a-Lago? More news coming out about that. But first, let's tell you about our friends over at Moomoo, because right now they're giving away 15 free stocks that you can grab. here in the new year to kick off it's weird because the stock market is kind of waiting right now. It's kind of waiting for the Fed. What are they going to do? Raise interest rates? What are they going to do? What are they going to do? So the stock market kind of was up today nicely. Gold prices up, silver up, stock market's acting wacky, but it doesn't matter. Right now, you could just open an account, get some free stocks, learn how to trade, wait on these stocks by going to redacted.inc/Mumu, and you can try it on your iPhone, your Android device, your Mac, your Windows device, whatever it is, and you can download the software, learn how to trade, learn how to set alerts, just even set up news alerts so you can follow some of the companies that you might want to invest in, some different commodities that you might be interested in, and oil and gas and gold and silver companies and producers of precious metals that we desperately need right now. So again, learn how to do it, get some free stocks in the process. Thanks to Mumu for supporting our show. Go to redacted.inc/Mumu. Again, it's redacted.inc/Mumu. Well, to the war in Ukraine now, where Russia scored a major victory in the east. President Biden just announced a big push of new weapons to Ukraine, including Bradley fighting vehicles.
Today, we jointly announced, you've already gotten copies of it, a statement saying that we're going to increase the support for Ukraine. We are going to provide the Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, the United States, to the Ukrainians.
And Ukraine Minister of Defense now admits their soldiers are being slaughtered for the sake of NATO's mission. Not Ukraine's mission, but NATO's mission. Listen.
Сьогодні в своїх промовах мої візаві, міністр оборони, чітко кажуть: Олексій, ми розуміємо, що ви бороните сьогодні весь цивілізаційний світ, весь Захід. Ви є реальним щитом цивілізації. Ми виконуємо місію НАТО сьогодні. Без втрати їхньої крові, з втратою нашої крові. Тому для них треба витрачати їх зброю.
And I don't recall hearing this before, actually, from the Ukrainian side. Joining us now is Colonel Douglas McGregor to find out about the state of this war and all of these moving pieces. Colonel, I don't recall, maybe you do, Ukraine speaking about NATO in these terms before. Let's take that first. That defense minister comments there is pretty eye-opening to me.
Well, I suppose it's eye-opening, but I see even larger dynamics occurring inside Ukraine itself. There are large numbers of Ukrainian soldiers who are suffering from tuberculosis. It's reached epidemic dimensions. And these soldiers are being shipped around the battlefield without regard to the fact that they're infectious, causing this tuberculosis epidemic to spread very rapidly. Secondly, the medical support for the Ukrainian soldiers is not very good. That's not the fault of Ukrainian doctors and nurses. It's simply a fact that they're overwhelmed with wounded, overwhelmed with the requirement to move these people away from the battlefield. And then finally, you have large numbers of Ukrainian soldiers who are being forced into uniform, sent to the front with relatively little training. They don't have trained officers and non-commissioned officers. And the reports that we hear repeatedly are that they go forward, they take heavy fire, they find that they've been abandoned by any NCOs or officers that were given to them, and then they're essentially chopped into meat by the Russians. Some of them are giving up. Some of them are just leaving the battlefield if they can get away, but of course then they have to deal with the Ukrainian secret police, which rounds them up and executes them. So it's a pretty frightening situation, and I think what this minister of Defense is trying to do is to put some distance between this disaster and the people in Kiev by saying, look, it's not really our fault. We're doing what NATO and Washington tell us to do. Well, I think that's true to some extent, but they have been gleefully sending thousands of Ukrainians into the meat grinder for months now. And these relentless attacks that never made any sense down south. Right. That have left them really bereft of manpower. So I would not be surprised in the near future if we do not hear about Ukrainian soldiers marching towards Kiev to deal decisively with this regime. I really think that's in the future.
So soldiers, disaffected soldiers saying enough is enough, going to Kiev and saying, where's Zelensky? Where's this leadership? We've had enough of it. Now, I want you to clarify that, because I've played videos of Ukrainian soldiers pointing out that they are chastising their leadership, talking about how they have no food, they have no weapons. And when we play these clips, we get hundreds of people that say, thank you for sharing the truth about what's happening there. And then inevitably, you get the few that say, this is all fake. This is fake news. You're a Russian puppet for showing what Ukrainian soldiers are saying about their leadership. But this is actually happening, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. Without question. I would compare the situation to the Tsarist army in 1917. I mean, the Russian forces, and they were not all Russians at that point, Ukrainians, Russians, all sorts of people from all over then the Tsarist Empire. They were dying by the boatload fighting the Germans. And if you go back and look at World War I, the Germans were totally different from the Germans of the Second War. They had no interest in invading the Soviet Union or invading Russia. And so what they did is they set up defenses on the eastern borders of Poland and the Baltic littoral. And then the Tsarist army simply expended its resources, human and otherwise, against German defenses with plentiful artillery and machine guns, mines and wire. And finally, the Tsarist army said, we've lost 1.5 million dead. We can't go on like this anymore. And there was no response. The Tsar should have said enough's enough, ended it, and led his army home. He'd still be in business if he had, but he didn't do that. And so you get the revolution. I think this is where the Ukrainians are headed, unless there's peace. And I think they know that. I think a bunch in Kiev is worried about it. There's no doubt in my mind. And if you go to Kherson, this area that was evacuated, the Ukrainian secret police has set up quite a network there and is running around punishing people left and right for speaking Russian. I mean, imagine sending American police into Arizona or New Mexico and punishing someone who speaks Spanish. It's absurd. Well, this is what's been going on. And very, very deliberately, the Russians have targeted SBU headquarters, Ukrainian secret police headquarters in Kherson, with the goal of essentially killing them and knocking them out of business. This whole house of cards in Ukraine will collapse. It's going to collapse sooner than I think Washington realizes.
And yet Washington, as we said in the intro, continues to funnel weapons. You heard President Biden with a new tranche of weapons, mentioning, of course, these new Bradley fighting vehicles. Now, I am not a steeped military man like yourself, but from what I understand of these vehicles, a lot of them had been mothballed for years. We have about 3,800 of them in the United States. There's about 2,500 or 2,800 of them that had been mothballed. They had been retrofitted for the wars in Iraq, in the desert. So they can shoot their anti-aircraft retrofitted and their infantry, so you can put infantry in them as well. Every time we hear about one of these new vehicles being shipped to Ukraine, it's always, and I read the Twitter comments from people, they're like, hallelujah, this is going to turn the tide of the war. This new vehicle will make a change. What do you say about this new tranche of weapons?
Many armies have been through the experience of betting heavily on the arrival of something new to turn things around. It never happens, because warfare is a product of a multitude of factors and various sets of equipment and various kinds of formations. The Bradley right now, the ones that we're likely sending are not necessarily the most up-to-date and modern model by any stretch of the imagination. And the Bradley, while it was adequate in 1991 for the war that we fought, is not a particularly impressive vehicle. The original Bradleys had the fuel essentially underneath the feet of the soldiers riding in the Bradley. And the Bradley was essentially a combination of iron, steel, and aluminum. And they had a bad habit of catching fire. We lost a Bradley in my unit in 1991 because a tow missile that was in the hammer, you had this thing that rises up and then fires the tow missile from the side of the track. That's your anti-tank weapon, if you will. And that exploded because it was struck by a 30 millimeter round from a BMP. The blast went into the Bradley, and the tow missiles that were inside the Bradley then exploded. We had a man killed outright, and then 3 others who were wounded. There were only 4 people at the time on the track, fortunately. We were able to get the other 3 out. They were wounded, obviously, but eventually returned to duty. And the thing burnt furiously for hours. The next morning, it looked like a 113. The turret had literally sunken down into the body of the Bradley. Now, the newest variants that they've been producing are designed differently. They've moved the fuel out of the way. They've changed some of the alloys that are being used. But the point is, this is not a wonder weapon, and it's not easily maintained. You're talking about a 25 millimeter chain gun, which was originally designed for use on helicopters. We had to send people to school for years to master these things. They come back, and in turn, they train soldiers. And it's not something that you do quickly. And I don't know how much experience any of these Ukrainian soldiers will have had with this kind of machinery. I doubt very much. And we haven't even talked about how do you maintain these things, because everything breaks down. It doesn't matter how good it is. And then how do you repair it and get it back into service? So the bottom line is, and I don't expect very many of these Bradleys to show up. Whenever they show up, they're not going to be immediately useful. And this is the problem with everything on that list. Everything we want to send or push into them demands time. Time to train people to use it properly, time to maintain it, time to refit it and send it into action and then keep it running. This is not an easy proposition for the Ukrainians. It would have been much easier if all of this material had been sent in March and April, because then you would have had some time to work on it. At that point, of course, the Russians were not at war with Ukraine. They were engaged in what they thought would be a punitive action to induce negotiations. It took them 3 or 4 months to figure out that wasn't going to happen. Now they are at war with Ukraine. Everything's changed. So the time, the opportunity to make any of this material work in any reasonable or meaningful way is over.
Stark. And we have the United States now, according to a report, and I'll get you out of here on this, Colonel, which is that the United States is now going to be training Ukrainians in Oklahoma on, I think if I'm not mistaken, the Patriot missile system, which we've talked about before here on the show is largely doesn't even really work. And so we're now bringing Ukrainians into the United States to be trained on these systems and then head back to the battlefield. What do you make of this?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't sign on for the notion that it doesn't work.
Okay.
I think it does work. How well is another question that I can't evaluate, but Raytheon produces excellent material, excellent missiles, first-class systems, radars, and so forth. So I wouldn't short shrift Raytheon.
So let me be clear then. What I've been hearing is that you need a lot of them for them to be really effective.
Oh, yeah.
So you need to blanket an area in the
Yeah, when we talked the last time, I said you'd need 10 battalions.
Right.
Okay, so 10 times what? 240 launchers? 10 times 24 launchers in every battalion. That's 240 launchers. That's thousands and thousands of missiles plus radars. And this is something that's very fragile. You can't move it quickly. Now, to go back to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, the Ukrainians that are going over there are going to get at least 3 months of very serious in-school training. That's fine. That's not enough. You need several months of experience, hands-on experience in the field within organizations of trained people that include officers and non-commissioned officers know what they're doing. My view is this: the probability of the Ukrainians being ready to employ this stuff on their own is very low. I think what we'll try to do is man it largely with Ukrainians, but then put NATO officers and NCOs from the United States, Germany, Great Britain, who have these same launchers, into Western Ukraine. They will then be used for point defense of whatever they deem to be important. They cannot protect the whole area, but they can provide adequate point defense, bridge, airports, factories, command centers, so forth. But when will this happen? Not quickly. Again, all of this takes time. What's coming next are these Russian offensives. And I think with the recent changes in the Russian command structure, moving Gerasimov, the chief of the Russian general staff, in to be the overall commander in Ukraine to ensure that Surovikin, who is still running the daily show, has everything that he wants and everything he needs, suggests to me that when they come, they're going to come soon within the next 3 or 4 weeks, because the ground is now largely frozen. It's going to be a crushing blow. And the Ukrainians themselves had admitted in this last interview, Zaluzhny and even Zelensky admitted what's coming is something we're going to have a lot of trouble surviving. They did everything but say, look, we're going to be crushed. And then they said, you've got to give us all this stuff. The problem with giving everything is too late. It's not going to change anything. But here's the good news inside Washington. The wealth transfer continues. In other words, the money that is moved over to DOD and then into the defense industrial complex and then to donors and interested parties that buy up politicians on the Hill, all of that continues without interruption. That's very important for Washington.
So the machine continues. And all of this talk about pulling back on Ukraine aid, it doesn't seem likely. It doesn't seem likely. The money's going to continue to flow. And we're going to continue to even build busts and statues inside of Washington, which is the next move. Colonel, thank you so much.
You have one more problem that needs to be addressed, and that is, how could we have miscalculated so badly? People at the top of the U.S. military establishment want nothing to do with this war in Ukraine. They have no objections to sending equipment and advisors, but they made it very clear they do not want this administration to commit any of our forces in Poland or Romania, let alone Polish and Romanian forces, to Western Ukraine. They're opposed to that. They understand that's something we can't do. We can't sustain it. We have 457,000 troops in the so-called active army. That's down from its real strength of 495. We can't recruit. We have only 74,000 men in the so-called ready reserves. So you're not talking about a large pool of replacements. And if we were to go into that environment and fight, you're talking about thousands of casualties, thousands of dead potentially. So the Pentagon knows that. The problem now is they bet heavily that the Ukrainians, based on that initial performance by the Russians, which they completely misinterpreted and didn't understand, they said, see, the Russians are weak. We can win this. That was always wrong. Now the problem is that we're going to have all these forces sitting there. Ukraine is going to collapse under the weight of the Russian offensives. And then people in Washington are going to say, we have to do something. We can't let this happen. We will have been shown as wrong. We will look like fools. We have to, quote unquote, do something. That's a very dangerous statement. And that's one that we've heard before over the last 50 years many times. We have to do something. Well, doing anything at this point in time would be very dangerous and very ill-advised. That's why I continue to warn that at the insistence of people in the White House, the State Department, and potentially on the Hill, the Department of Defense may be goaded into action that it would otherwise not want to take. And in every dispute since 1963 between the JCS and the president and his friends have always won the fight.
Well, unbelievable and eye-opening, as always, Colonel. Thank you for sharing. There's some big pieces of this that I had no idea of tonight. So thank you for sharing some of these, certainly the medical stories I had not heard. They're really, really fascinating. We'll have you back real soon. We really appreciate your insight, as always, Colonel. Thank you so much for joining us, as always.
Thank you, Clayton.
I'd love to hear, your thoughts on this, guys, in the chat. I mean, tuberculosis, when you don't have food, and so when we've played those videos of soldiers saying, this is what's happening to us, and we don't have the leadership that we need, we don't have the weapons, we don't have the food, and it's an absolute disaster.
They're lambs to a slaughter.
Yeah, it's...
Well, and also they don't even take into consideration the weather conditions they're dealing with. Like that alone, just being out there in the winter,
freezing.
You can't always be warm when you're out there in the winter, because you can't just be huddled by a fire because,
Yeah,
it doesn't work that way.
Well, and of course the problem, what we all learned in the Battle of the Bulge, right, is that when you can't have a fire, because the moment you light a fire, you give away your position. So if you're holed up in a trench, you don't light a fire. And that's, of course, what's been happening in the eastern part of Ukraine right now, and any time that someone is trying to light a fire, they're being hit with thermobaric weapons and destroyed. So it's an absolute disaster. And I just think it's interesting that the defense minister is saying, this is NATO's war. Like, they're guiding us. They're telling us basically what to do. And we are lambs to the slaughter right now.
Yeah.
Really, really troubling. We've got breaking news we're going to get to here. The president just speaking a short time ago on these documents, a new round of illegal top secret documents taken from the White House showing up. And, there's a bunch of conspiracy theories floating around outside from people I trust saying, wait a second, I'm just going to throw this out there. You guys tell me in the chat if you think that this is maybe the case, the conspiracy theory. But conspiracy theories, it's a 6-month spoiler alert. So I'm saying, was he set up? Some people I trust, some really interesting people I trust saying, was he set up? Were documents placed? Are they trying to get rid of him?
Of Biden?
Are Democrats trying to get rid of him in order to move him out of the way? Like, they do not want this guy running in 2024.
If that's the case, though, the mainstream media did not get the memo because they are all in on this is not the
big
same.
deal.
This is not what Trump did. We're going to show you a little bit about that later.
They're all like, oh, Trump took this many, but Biden only took this many. And Trump, this was top secret, but these are only top
These are
secret,
medium top secret. These are like medium rare. They're like, it's hilarious.
Just excusing it away, everything they can say that just like, oh, it minimizes his and maximizes Trump's.
Yeah.
Okay, but can we just play that out a little? David, stay with us. No, give me David back. Yeah, thank you.
Don't take him away.
Yeah. Give him back.
I do what I want.
Okay, sorry. But if that's true, and we would have two most recent presidents under investigation, is that better? Would we have a more cohesive nation? Would that be healing?
Well, not at all. No.
Healing. I don't. But the idea is that we're going to heal from these guys and get somebody that's
coalesce.
Different. Like, who are you going to get? Gavin Newsom in his place?
That's what I think. Like, what I feel is like if people would look at this like, okay, here is a moment where we've got the common enemy. Like, they're all doing the same thing. And we're all standing on one side or the other where it's like, why don't we all unite against this common enemy that is doing the same thing? They're all lying to us. They're all doing the same things. It's not one party or the other. And it is a moment of unity, I feel, but I don't think people grasp that because they're so busy trying to choose their side.
Right, because it's Democrat or Republican. And if you step back and you say, wait a second, both of these parties are corrupt, and you understand why 100 million Americans don't vote for either party because they know they're corrupt, they're smart enough to realize these guys are all clowns, save a few of them. You know, you got a few little gems, diamonds in the rough, but mostly they're all clowns. And so then it's another layer. It's like 3D chess, right? Because then what's the layer below that? Well, it's the deep state. It's the permanent Washington, D.C. that is the real enemy here, right? It's the permanent entrenched government that is there, that's unelected and stays there for 30 years. That's who's running the show. That's who's really running everything. And we know that. It's the unelected globalists that are running everything. So let's talk about these Biden documents because holy smokes, this is developing right now as we speak because we now have the president speaking just moments ago. We'll get to that, but maybe we should just set up where we are with these latest round of top secret documents.
Okay, so earlier in the week, we had reports coming out that the FBI was looking into classified documents that President Biden should not have had, and they were found in one of his offices. Attorney General Merrick Garland has now assigned the U.S. Attorney in Chicago to look into those documents and how they got there. We're going to get to that guy in a second. Here is what the president said when he was in Mexico about the first discovery.
First, people know I take classified documents and classified information seriously. When my lawyers were clearing out my office at the University of Pennsylvania, they set up an office for me, secure office in the Capitol. The 4 years after being vice president, I was a professor at Penn.
Hold on. I was a professor at Penn? Okay, let's just put a pin in that. I didn't realize that, but go ahead, Mr. President. You were a professor at Penn?
They found some documents in a box in a locked cabinet, or at least a closet. And as soon as they did, they realized there were several classified documents in that box. And they did what they should have done. They immediately called the archives, turned them over to the archives, and I was briefed about this discovery and surprised to learn that there were any government records that were taken there to that office. But I don't know what's in the documents. My lawyers have not suggested I ask what documents they were. I've turned over the boxes. They've turned over the boxes to the archives, and we're cooperating fully with the review, and which I hope will be finished soon.
They told me not to ask any questions.
Yeah, don't ask what's in them.
Plausible deniability. Mr. President, don't ask. You stole them. They're in your office. I mean, I don't know if you stole them, but they're in your office. Why are they there? Why are they, by the way, rummaging through them anyway? Like, why are the lawyers suddenly there rummaging?
And this office was opened in 2018, which has a 2-year gap between his vice presidency and this office being opened. So why were they put there in the first place? Why there?
Yeah.
We have more questions about that.
And David has a question.
Yeah, my question is, if his office, that's not even his home, is that secure, then how is President Trump's home not more secure than an office would be? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like saying that it's okay to have them in a secure location. It was secured. Well, it was in a lockbox. Well, maybe it was in a closet, you know, which is the same scenario as Trump. Like, why is it any worse or any better that his was in an office and not the president?
Right,
Trump?
and
'Cause
here's
we know how
something
secure those places
I
are.
keep coming around to is like, why can't the U.S. have a filing system for what's classified? If it's classified, let's put an A and then a B and then like put where A and B are. In why?
Well, and like,
that's not hard.
We talked about this on the show at one point. Like, they have to check out those documents. It's not like they're just handed that document. They sign for those documents. They get the document and then they turn it back in. It's not like okay, here, you signed for this document. Okay, I'm going to go make some copies of this really quick, put it in a folder and send it to my office. Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a great question. But don't ask questions, David. You're not allowed to ask questions. You're not allowed to ask questions. And by the way, his lawyers told him not to ask questions about these documents.
Well, I'm asking questions here, guys.
Fire away, lady in red.
Okay, so now another round of documents have reportedly been found in the possession of President Biden. Now, he is saying, I don't know what's in there, but CNN says that they do. They say that these are U.S. intelligence memos and briefing materials that covered topics including Ukraine, Iran, and the United Kingdom.
Wait, including Ukraine, Iran, and the UK.
Yes.
I wonder if in these documents are the plans for the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline.
Wonder about that too.
By the UK
now, you
government.
don't have to be a genius to know that those are matters of national security. What did you hear?
I saw somewhere someone said that it could contain information about the money from Ukraine, like the whole, money that he was sending.
Yeah, because the timeline, the timeline puts it before the war in Ukraine.
Yes.
The timeline puts it before that.
Absolutely.
So-
We don't know exactly when, because if it was when he was in office, then it's up to 2016. I don't know.
How did CNN figure this out? CNN. So this is why
They're saying a separate source familiar with the matter. I don't know, because everybody's so tight-lipped about it. I'm not sure how much stock I put into that, but I don't know that CNN clearly does not want this to be bad. We're going to show you that in a second. Now, here's what the President's Counsel released just a few hours ago. This is from Richard Sauber, and he's saying that we are completely, cooperating. He lays out what they've been doing in the second paragraph. That's where I'm going to start. Following the discovery of government documents at the Penn Biden Center in November of 2022, and coordinating closely with the Department of Justice, the president's lawyers have searched the president's Wilmington and Rehoboth Beach residence in Delaware, the other location where files from his vice presidential office might have been shipped in the course of the 2017 transition. The lawyers completed that review just last night. That means Wednesday. During the review, the lawyers did discover, among personal and political papers, a small number of additional Obama-Biden administration records with classified markings. All but one of these documents were found in storage space in the president's Wilmington garage. Just chilling out in the garage, you guys.
Oh, okay.
One document consisted of one page that was discovered among stored materials in adjacent rooms. No documents at the Rehoboth Beach residence. As was done in the case of the Penn Biden Center, the Justice Department was immediately notified, and the lawyers arranged for the Department of Justice to take possession of those documents. And the White House, he says, will continue to cooperate. Now, I am not clear if this is the second documents that were found in these, because the second round of documents was reported before this statement. So I don't know if this is the second or the third. We're not giving clarification on this. But remember that in August, when we went down the timeline of what the Justice Department did with Trump's lawyers to get classified documents, there was something similar. The lawyers asked some questions, were asked questions. The lawyers did a search, and then they signed an affidavit that this was all they found. The FBI didn't accept that, and so they raided. So now here we have a similar situation. Biden's lawyers, like Trump's, saying this is all we've got. And so is that it for President Biden when that wasn't it for President Trump? Or do they have a reason to believe that they need to maybe do a raid? This is a reasonable question. Does the FBI just take their word for it? One guy's and not the others.
I want to, you know how you have the little bill that sits on Capitol Hill and tells you like how a bill goes in to become a law? I want to know the path that the top secret document takes to end up in a president's garage.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
wouldn't you want to know
back there with like the baseballs and
right? Yeah,
Right.
the old baseball mitts and the lawnmower.
Well, like, you know,
they're like brushing it
looking
off
through
and like,
documents
this is classified.
Oh, there's grandma's wedding, certificate. I was looking for that. And then, there's documents about how we, staged a coup in Venezuela. We didn't mean to have that.
Oh, here's a document about the puppet government we installed in Ukraine. Oh, I should probably put that over there with the baseballs and the footballs. But why?
And somebody wrote a cheesecake recipe on the back of it.
Cheesecake. But, you got to think about it, though. I'm sorry, if all of this stuff is happening to Trump, right, and all of this raid is happening, all of these classified documents, there's, a national uproar from the media about Trump's documents, you would think you would perhaps get your own house in order, right? Like, hey, we've got 5 houses, one in Wilmington, one in Rehoboth. We got an office in Philly. Can you go and check, make sure I didn't inadvertently grab any documents, and maybe we should rectify that?
You would think that the Clintons are doing that the Obamas are doing that, that President...
In the same way that Facebook and YouTube and Twitch and TikTok are all right now, like going through and probably like burning and, destroying documents.
Yes.
So, just because they've seen what happened to Twitter.
The Bushes, they should be doing that. All of them most likely are going to say, let's double, triple check. It doesn't inspire very much confidence as an American that these documents are well kept in a good order. They might need to look into a little something called the Dewey Decimal System. Now, let's go back to how the media, though, is spinning this, because CBS News is reporting that the president's lawyers found these documents in November. And right away, the media is telling us he didn't mean it, he doesn't know he was there, and don't even try to compare this with Trump. Now, here's something that I just found interesting on Twitter, because the day the story broke on Tuesday, Andrea Mitchell, who is a senior political correspondent at NBC News, puts this tweet out right away on Tuesday. I interviewed Joe Biden in his office at the Penn Biden Center, where his lawyers say they found a small number of classified documents. As far as we know, very different from Trump, hiding and withholding hundreds of documents despite requests and subpoenas, but GOP is pouncing. Now, would you think from this that she's on this story, that she's interviewing him, that she maybe had seen the facilities? This confused me because Tuesday is when the president was in Mexico. And so when did this happen? I actually did respond to this on Twitter and say, when did this happen? Because he was in Mexico on Tuesday. Are you saying that you interviewed him at a different time? Because you're drawing a conclusion that this is different from Trump. And I had one sleuth Twitter follower who said, no, actually, this is from 2018. They found me this tweet from 2018 when the Penn Biden Center was opening, and she interviewed him 5 years ago. And so that's a very disingenuous tweet for her to say, I interviewed him in this place where documents were found. She's not saying she did it today, but she's leading us to believe that she's on this story and that we absolutely should not draw the conclusion about President Trump.
That's garbage. Yeah, she's using a photo from 5 years ago.
5 years ago. And in fact, you can find, I did go back, I scrolled all the way through and found this original tweet in 2018. Here she is in the dress and him standing in the same place that was in her original tweet when she told us that she had seen this place and that there's nothing to see. She's drawing this conclusion.
Dirty.
Well, and just that camera alone tells me it's more than, several years ago.
Oh, okay. See, you're on that one. Now, CNN takes this one step further with this graphic. And this, like the journalism student, Natalie, is screaming, this is not the job of the media. They made this graphic to let us know how these are two distinct cases. One guy's smiling and happy and innocent. The other one looks very suspect and untrustworthy and is scowling, side-by-side comparison. There's just a couple, maybe a dozen or so documents. Some are top secret and some are just classified because it's fun to use a self-inking stamp. And they're cooperating, and it's the lawyers that found the archives and alerted. In fact,
and that's just
Trump's lawyers did alert about certain things when they were asked. They cooperated to an extent, obviously not to the fullest extent, because the raid produced extra documents. And some are also making the distinction that one person in previous office had the power to declassify materials and one person did not. We're going to get to that in a second.
Can we play this breaking news?
Our guy ended 60 lives, and this guy ended 12. This guy used a knife, and this guy used a spoon.
Right.
You still ended lives. It doesn't freaking matter.
Yeah, and this is clear partisan journalism here, just like letting you know the conclusion you should draw.
So before we go on, I do want to play this, Philip, because this is from just a few minutes ago. Actually, this was at 10:50. So this was a little earlier today, actually. Sorry, this is a little earlier today. Biden responding directly now to the second or third batch of papers that have been found. So where we are in the story, let's play this. Take a listen.
Okay. Classified material next to your Corvette. What were you thinking?
Let me, I'm going to get a chance to speak on all this, God willing, soon. But as I said earlier this week, people, and by the way, my Corvette's in a locked garage. Okay? So it's not like they're sitting out in the street.
So
but anyway.
Was in a locked garage.
Yes, as well as my Corvette. But as I said earlier this week, people know I take classified documents and classified materials seriously. I also said we're cooperating fully and completely with the Justice Department's review. As part of that process, my lawyers reviewed other places where documents from my time as vice president were stored, and they finished the review last night. They discovered a small number of documents of classified markings in storage areas in file cabinets in my home and my personal library. This was done in the case of the Biden Penn. This was done in the case of the Biden Penn Center. The Department of Justice was immediately, as was done, the Department of Justice was immediately notified, and the lawyers arranged for the Department of Justice to take possession of the document. So we're going to see all this unfold. I'm confident. Thank you very much.
What was that? Did you hear him at the end go, ooh, 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 ooh?
Good to see you. Good to see you. I'm getting out of here. He's like, oh man, what did I just walk into?
Yeah.
I shouldn't have done this press. By the way, he never does press conferences.
No.
So this is the reason why
he must have grabbed Pierre's book because he was like reading that all.
Oh, you read the whole thing off a script, you know? You're, as Brandon Straka says, you know, when you're reading an explanation of your own actions and wrongdoing that clearly somebody else wrote, you can't even get that out clearly. Like, you can't even say that clearly or cleanly.
All right, but let's go back to this narrative
on
that it's okay because he's cooperating. Can we move on to that? Mm-hmm. Because I'd like to throw this one to Hermeet Dillon. She's a lawyer, and she's running for the chair of the Republican National Committee. She says, doesn't matter if he's cooperating or not. This is still an illegal thing to do. Listen to what she told Tucker last night.
By the way, that's kind of a consensus view in Washington, a city that needs to change. Hermeet Dillon plans to try and change it. She's running for RNC chair. She joins us tonight to assess what we're seeing now. Hermeet, thanks so much for coming on. So he did the right thing. Is that a legal defense?
Not at all, Tucker. What we are seeing here is actually a cover-up of typical Washington proportions. In fact, it looks now like at least one of these troves of documents was identified before the midterm elections, but we're just hearing about it now. So it was concealed from the country to affect the outcome of an election. Secondly, it looks like there have been at least now 3 instances of these documents being moved. The first is out of the White House in 2017 as the Obama and Biden administrations were vacating. Secondly, into location number 1. Thirdly, into location number 2. And if the DOJ were serious about this, Tucker, they should be raiding all of Biden's homes and vacation destinations over the last several years to see, rifle through the sofa cushions, see if there are any classified documents there, because you can really have no confidence with this set of facts that we're at the end of the discovery of these documents. And an important distinction here is that President Trump had the absolute authority under federal law to declassify documents and also to keep documents for a period of time while he was looking through them for his archives before turning them over to the National Archives. Vice President Joe Biden has no such defense to that. And so I'm not buying any of this. And the other complicating factor here, Tucker, is that multiple members of the former vice president's family have close and questionable ties to foreign governments, including China and Ukraine. At least one of these documents pertains to the Ukraine. And there are serious federal penalties for giving access to foreign governments to these classified documents and a longer statute of limitations. This is a major criminal investigation issue, and brushing it under the rug by giving it to a recent United States attorney holdover from the Trump era is no substitute for a special counsel, which is how Democrats have treated the Mar-a-Lago documents. So there's a lot to see here, and we aren't at the end of it yet, Tucker.
He did the right. If you discover that I robbed a liquor store 6 years ago and I returned the money to the cash register, I'm still guilty of a crime.
No harm, no foul in Washington, apparently.
He did the right thing, yeah.
All right.
Well, and I think that the agents are going to be very unhappy when they get there and find out that the garage is locked.
Right.
Yeah, we're here to why were they all going to his different locations recently? Like going through his garage, okay, so you have lawyers like rifling through stuff all of a
But
sudden.
also, why last night when the documents, the first round, were found in November, and then the lawyer's statement says, well, we went through, because this happened in November, I guess we got back to work, we decided to take the holidays anyway. Right? Why would they do this search last night all of a sudden? Is it because the news broke? Because they should have been working on this starting in November if any classified documents were found. Now, let's get a little bit to the investigation. We're going to jump ahead to who is doing this investigation and what this means. Now, the FBI says that this is just a preliminary investigation and that Merrick Garland has assigned this guy, I want to show you his picture, to investigate. Now, Democrats are upset. They are preemptively saying that they're unhappy with this because this guy is U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, John Lausch. He looks a little like Steve Carell, don't you think, in that picture?
Steve Carell.
Incidentally, President Biden tried to fire him when he took office, but the two senators from Illinois asked him not to. Here's the statement from Senators Durbin and Duckworth saying, please, we need to keep our U.S. attorney here in Illinois. He's up to a lot of stuff. He's in the middle of important things, and we'd like to keep him. And so he was removed from the chopping block, and he stayed. Lausch is one of only 2 Trump-appointed U.S. attorneys still in office. So it's interesting that Merrick Garland would choose him to do this. Guess who's the other only remaining Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in office? I'm going to tell you. David Weiss. It's U.S. Attorney David Weiss who is leading an investigation into the president's son, Hunter Biden. So 2 Biden inquiries now. 2 Trump-appointed U.S. attorneys leading them. Is this Merrick Garland being clever? It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, we can go over, I had intended to, but we're running a bit long to go over like the Justice Department's motions against Trump and their motions for the raid and all of that, because we have a lot to look at where we compare, is this the same or is it not? We can save that for another time, but we'll leave you with White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre saying when she's pushed on this timeline by CBS reporter Ed O'Keefe, why was this kept from us if the documents were found November 2nd? Why was this another Hunter Biden treatment of a story that was suppressed ahead of an election? And he gets pretty testy with her. She absolutely doesn't like it. Watch.
On these documents, how could anyone be that irresponsible? Isn't that what this president says about mishandling classified documents?
The president spoke to this personally. He spoke to this personally. He believes that classified documents and information should be taken seriously. He takes them seriously, and he was surprised to learn by any records had been. I disagree.
Okay, that was that was the one with Peter Doocy. I didn't mean to say it that way. Came out wrong. Do we have another one? Yes, that one. Let's do this one with Ed O'Keefe. I'm sorry, they were in the wrong order.
On the documents case, again, you've laid out that the president's lawyers and the special counsel are dealing with the legal side of this. You've now laid out that you have not had a conversation with the president about this. But this was reported Monday. It happened in November. Are you aware of any conversation in the West Wing among others, people other than the president, about disclosing this once it was discovered?
What I can say is I was asked by your colleague if we talked about the documents themselves. The president said he does not know what was in them, right? But also just wanted to clear that up. I understand you guys are going to have a lot of questions on this. I get that. I know you guys are going to have a lot of questions on process and specifics. And what I can tell you is that I'm not going to go beyond what the president laid out. I'm not going to go beyond what my White House counsel colleagues have stated. I would refer you to them for any other specifics or additional information. I want to be prudent here. I want to make sure that we do this in the appropriate way.
We're going to ask them because that's our job.
I understand, and my job is to answer your questions. So here we go. Let's go.
We asked this is because on day 2 of this administration, when he swore all of you in, the president said, quote, "I'm going to make mistakes. When I make them, I'll acknowledge them, and I'll tell you, and I'll need your help to help me correct them." So you're the one here talking to us about this. That's why we're asking you. So let's just remember that. When he was asked yesterday,
Ed, we don't need to have this. We work very well together. We don't need to have this kind of confrontation. Ask your question, and I will answer them the best that I can.
Part of the reason we're laying that out is because you're laying out your part of the job. We're laying out our part of the job.
I know, but I'm just saying that we don't need to have contention. You don't need to be contentious with me here, Ed.
The president was asked yesterday, but did not answer this part of the question. Why didn't he or someone in the White House inform the American people when these documents were discovered on November 2nd? Did it have anything to do, because people are asking this part of it, did it have anything to do with the fact that the election was just a few days away?
Again, Ed, this is under review by the Department of Justice. It is literally under review right now. As I am talking to you, it is under review. So I'm not going to get beyond the process. I'm not going to get beyond what the president said. Look, the White House counsel, my colleagues in the White House counsel, laid out a very detailed information about what this particular issue on Monday. You all have that. I'm just not going to get beyond that. The Department of Justice is independent, as you know. They're doing a review, and I want to be prudent here. And it would be more appropriate. It would be more appropriate for my colleagues in the White House counsel's office to address this.
Then we walk them into the briefing room, and we hope they can come soon to discuss this. But there's another thing. There was nothing stopping the President of the United States from disclosing the discovery of these classified documents in his former office before it was under Justice Department review.
What I can tell you right now is what the president is share with you what the president said to all of you.
So the question is November 2nd. Why didn't we learn about this before the election?
Yeah.
That's the question.
No, these are super appropriate questions. And you can tell that she is just thrown by being asked them to someone. She's like, oh, we usually work so well together. You usually don't hurt my feelings.
Yeah, you're
you usually
CBS.
Don't hurt me.
You're CBS. You're just a mouthpiece of the intelligence state. So you see all the 60 Minutes pieces over the past 6 months. They're all shill pieces for our Biden White House. We don't have to fight like this. You don't have to be contentious with me.
Yeah, but I don't understand because I thought she was perfectly clear. Like I thought that she was perfectly clear with what she said. Like she said, I got it. So if you guys didn't get it, I guess.
Oh.
I want to be perfectly clear. I think we've been perfectly clear. The president was perfectly clear. Yeah, and as people are pointing out here in the chat, it's not under review. Like it wasn't. What do you mean it's under review? So there was a period where it wasn't under review. You could have told us about this. You could have let us know this.
Right. Yeah. Good point. Excellent point.
So we will have more on this fallout. That they found another box, now next to his Corvette. What's it going to be? What's it going to be next time? We'll find out with the next one.
Behind the tool shed. Now that one wasn't locked.
I like how that's pushed though. That narrative is pushed where they're saying like, well, he did the right thing, but now it's a review. So it's like basically he did the right thing when he absolutely had to. He didn't do it at the time. So it's not like he admitted to the crime immediately. It was just when it was about to blow up, then he did the right thing.
Yeah, he did the right thing when he got busted.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
All right. So Bush family Clinton family, time to look in your garage and the garage of your children.
And come forward with what you have.
And now is a good
Don't
time.
destroy your computers.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure they've already done that.
Don't smash phones.
We've got more news to get to here on this Thursday. For that, we are going to move over to Rumble. So I would hope all of you, are we having a server issue at all? No, it's kind of bit rate weirdness on YouTube. But please, I see, we're glitchy. All over the place, we're glitchy.
Are we glitchy also on Rumble?
On Rumble as well.
That could be me. Give me a second and then it should.
No, we're good.
Oh, it looks like we're back.
Are you okay? We're good? It's not you, it's me. It's not you.
We're not glitchy on my end.
Okay.
No, you guys are probably seeing stuff glitch because of what I'm doing right now.
Oh, okay.
Server's running smooth.
All right, so we are going to say goodbye to those of you on YouTube. Please click the link and join us on Rumble because we're going to talk about things that are COVID related that YouTube doesn't always welcome. And so we find it necessary to go to a platform where we are not censored. The link is in the chat. It is also
or you can mention
right
it
there.
as well.
It's rumble.com/redacted. Yeah, but people like a link.
I know, but people also don't, if they're driving, they want to see it later. So if they're listening later, they want to go check our channel out. It's rumble.com/redacted, rumble.com/redacted. We've got 19,000 or 20,000 of you on YouTube. Come on over to Rumble and subscribe to us on Rumble. I think we've got about 100 and we're almost at 200,000 subscribers now on Rumble, or 170. Let's see if we can get it up to 180 by tonight. How about that? 180,000 on Rumble. We would love. It's just a mass. We just got to get there. We would love to be able to move completely to Rumble. That's the goal.
Yes, but I see how many people now are regularly joining us on Rumble, like names that we would see before on YouTube. And I just want to say I really appreciate that.
And a lot of Rumblers are saying, hey, instead of starting on YouTube, like when you're watching, just why don't you guys start on Rumble? Like if you're watching at home, you're watching on your Apple TV, your Roku device, your phone, your Android device, wherever you watch us, let us know in the chat actually where you watch us. I'm curious. Start your experience on Rumble if you'd like, because that'll help us move over there completely. We're big fans of this company that stands for free speech. And our goal is to use the mass of YouTube to move us to Rumble. That's the goal. And we've been meeting with Rumble and the team about that whole process. So that's really the goal. So thank you guys so much for your super chats over there and your really nice Rumble chats. So come on over and subscribe, please, to Rumble. So nice to see all of you guys. Okay.
All right. Goodbye, YouTube. See you on Monday.
Thanks.